Thanks for everything one time. I'm going to synchronize to your notes. Okay, got it.
We're a minute in right now.
Got it.
Good morning. With that sitting in front of you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shenten Quingi Shigyo Jinjen Je
Sujin Nemba Langi Zawaru Leba Duni Beba Dumayi Guba Jamba Demba Jingi Lo
Linje Nyebe Dawe Densandi Shinto Nyeka Danshen Shigyo Ninzen Kunto Nimbo
Lembe Lo Gyunji Meva Gewa Jingi Lo Luto Yawa Chi Chubur Shin Yodu Chibe Chiwa Demba Chiwe Jesu Ludan Drema Shin Karna Lindri Chishin Rawala Neva Dewa Nye 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 Beto Trashin Trawa Nyam Kyam Bongwa Dang Keso Tada Drubar Jebala Dadu Badan Demba Jingilo Chibe Mina Dune Kungi Ko Yire Miran Sibe Punzogi Nimirine Tarbe Dewala Tunye Jemboge Warjilo Nanda Samba Deyi Rambayi Jenda Shishin Bayu Jemboyi Dembe Tawa Suzur Darbala Juba Nimba Jeba Jingilo Rani Zizor Lungwa Jishindu Magyar Drowa Kingyan Dentawa Tane Drowa Gurwe Kugerwe Janju Senjo Juvar Jingilo Senzan Gigan Sujun Sun La Gomba Mena Janju Mijupa Lemba Doni Geze Donbala Sumba Drabu Lover Jingilo Yole Yula Yewen Shije Shine Yanda Kanla Seshin Shabayi Shine Laptun Sundu Jawela Nyodu Gila Gewar Jingilo Tumo Lanja Nyodu Gilbana Teba Gungi Shogur Doje Dek Kesan Gewo Jungo Damba Der Delan Yudu Jubar Jingilo Deze Muju Nani Jubeshi Nanda Danzi Domba Zumwala Chuma Mimbe Nimba Nigune Sodan Dode Sumwar Jingilo Dene Yude Nimbo Riniki Denanji Shindone Sambayi Tunjine Joshole Miyawa Dambe Sushin Jubar Jingilo Dedar Lansan Tame Shenyenda Sushin Dube Dona Shabden Shin
Shina nangi bardu chebe zo nyewa shiwa jingi labdu zo kewa kundu yanda lama dan drame jugi pela long jujing sara langi yunten rabzo ne doje shangi komanyo do Sangye chana zagi chana la janju bardu dani gyasuji Dagi chenye gi besanangi Jola penche sangye drubar sho Sangye chana zogi chana la janju bardu dani gyasuji Dagi chenye gi besanangi Jola penche sangye drubar sho Sangye chana zogi chana la janju bardu dani gyasuji Dagi chanye gi besanangi Dola bencher sangye drubar sho Taji bugi juji medan tran Rira linji ninde gambadi Sangye jingo mingde wargi Joga namda shinla jabar sho Hinangulu rana mandala kam niryata yami. Okay. Then first chapter of Ayadeva's treatise is on impermanence. Impermanence as an antidote to the erring belief that things persist through time and are not impermanent. So last time we read a little bit from the beginning and the first verse, and then we read also from the Larim Chemo, from Kabbas Larim Chemo, we read a description of the disadvantages of failing to cultivate an understanding of impermanence. And mainly that was last week's discussion. So today, I'd like to start with some handouts. The two handouts that, if you don't have them, they're up on the front up there. So these are kind of meant to be inspirational and to be relevant to the topic. The first one is a verse from a letter, a letter which Jetong Kaba wrote to one of his disciples, Horton Nangapel. This disciple, probably best known for compiling a work on the 7-point mind training root text. It's translated as mind training like the rays of the sun, which is an early Gelufra work. And this disciple compiled is based on Tsongkhapa's teaching. Anyway, this is a letter to him. Hor means actually is a word for Mongolia, a Tibetan word for Mongolia, but it's actually referring to an area in Amdo, eastern part of Tibet, where there were a lot of people who had some of their ancestors were Mongolians who settled there. So it's called Hortan, means the teacher from Hor. And so in this is a reason I picked this verse is it's quoted by Pabongka Rinpoche in his Lamrim text, Namdro Lakjang. And I quote it because recently I've been translating for Gyume Cancer Osan Jambar Rinpoche from DNKL. And he's quoted this text, lines from this text without necessarily citing it. So anyway, this is one verse, and it addresses all of the topics of the first stage of the Lamrim. So if you have it, it's titled a verse from Jessup Kappa's Laying the Foundation for Happiness and Well-Being. So it says, Nieka is Nyevarkawa is referring to one topic in the Deljor section. Deljor is the topic, one of the first topics in the Lamrim on appreciating the value of the human life. And so Nyeka literally means difficult to obtain. So it's rarity, understanding how rare it is, and therefore valuing it. And then the second line says Dönchen. Dönchen means great meaning, literally, but really very valuable in the sense that what you can do with this human life is literally unlimited. All the spiritual goals, possible spiritual goals, can be attained with the life, this human life. And so we should recognize its value and make the most of it. And then the third line says chua means death, so it's talking about reflecting on impermanence, rough impermanence. And then lendre is karma. So karma is the last of the main topics in Shivu's lower section. So they all have this conditional form. They say rikpa or samna. So it means if you understand, rikpa means to know, or if you na means is a conditional if or when, right? Upon understanding how difficult it is to obtain a human life, then these are the benefits. So these are the benefits that you will gain. And so the punchline in each of the four lines is the purpose. It describes the purpose of the topic. And so they're put in kind of almost vernacular Tibetan, and they're you may hear them. Teachers use the expression. So it says, if you understand how difficult it is to obtain human rebirth, then it says ginar. Ginar means idle, to be idle, do nothing. To be someone who's kind of not doing anything important or just idle. Ginar deva means to remain idle. And ginar tab me means literally means there's no way that you will remain idle. So it means if you think about how difficult it is to obtain human rebirth, then you'll feel the urgency to take action, so you won't remain idle. And the second one says Dönjen Samna. Dönjen Samna means if you reflect. Sam here means to think about or reflect about its great importance. And Dönme Dawa Pang. Then these are all very interesting. These are all sort of useful Tibetan vocabulary. Dönme means meaningless. So it means actually Dönmeva literally means meaningless. It can also mean the antithesis of meaningful. So it can mean sometimes it can mean wrongful things. But here I think probably more just meaningless. Dönme and dawa means to pass time or spend time. So to just basically do useless activities. Dönme dawa. Then the last word is the one that's kind of very interesting in Tibetan. Pang. Then pang is a word which, when you hear the word, if you understand the Tibetan word, it immediately evokes a certain emotion. It refers to an emotion. And I don't know that there's an English word that is the exact parallel to it. So in Tibetan, the people say, I use a really kind of colloquialisms. Somebody says, if something that's really you hear something that happened that was really unfortunate, or someone experienced something calamitous in their life, then Tibetan expects to be aka. Do you know that word?
Yeah.
Aka. It means that you're kind of struck by it. It means you're struck by it in a way that it moves you, and you feel this kind of sense of loss that the person experienced. So that's what pang means. Pang sem. You can say pang sem. Pang sem means this feeling of that how if you allowed yourself to spend your time meaninglessly, and you recognized that you had done that, then immediately your reaction would be, oh, this is a horrible thing I've done. But this feeling, a sense of great, not sadness. It's a sense of, it's kind of a sense of remorse, but it's not as sort of, it doesn't have quite the same nuance as regret. It's more pang. There's a real kind of there's a kind of sharpness to it, of this feeling of loss. So it's a sense of loss, really, is what it represents. Okay, so you will feel a sense of loss if you spend your time meaninglessly, it says, if you reflect on the importance of human life. Then the third one, Chiwasamna, means if you reflect on death, Chimar Jojapje. Chimar Jojapje. You know that? Well, it's their side. I don't know. So Jojap means prepare to go. Prepare to go to the next life. Chima means to the next. That means the next life. Jojapje means it will cause you to prepare in your mind and to act in a way that you're getting ready for future lives. So that is an image which is often described in Lamrim, saying that we are mere visitors here in this life, and that we should think of ourselves as only being here temporarily, and that we have a much longer journey waiting for us. So we shouldn't be thinking about buying a house and settling in. We should be thinking about getting everything in order before we leave for the next place. So like that. So if you think about death, it will give you that sense of focusing on future lives. It's very nice. I mean, it's kind of it's poetic. In the Tibetan, it has that kind of tone to it. Then Lendre Samna. Then this is also on topic. So Lendre Samna means then the final topic in the lower section of the first part of the Lamrim Kibutungu is to reflect on karma. And then it says, if you've done that, Angme nele dok. Now that's also a good phrase. But it says, I translated it as here, it just says, turns one away from heedlessness. But it actually is saying more than that. It says, Bang mebe ne le dok. And the word ne usually means a place. But it's not, it doesn't mean a place. Bang mebe ne means those circumstances or those opportunities or those occasions where those things which will provoke heedlessness, the kind of behavior that will allow you to fall into a state of heedlessness, you will turn away from that. So it means here, I guess you could say behavior. Even you could say you will turn away from heedless behaviors. That's a little bit loose. But ne, so for instance, you say Miguel ne, for instance, Miguel is a non-virtuous deed. Miguel ne means then those situations, those opportunities, those circumstances in which you might engage in non-virtuous activity. So that ne means has that special meaning to it. Okay, so so this verse is I like it for the terms, the ginarga tabme, and the kind of the positive effect that each of these topics is meant to have on you, and sort of the phrases that are used to express that. Okay, so then the second one was this. Also, this is quoted in Pabongara Islam, but it's from one of Milarepa's songs, and this is from. This is interesting because so the 100,000 songs of Milarepa, there are two main texts. One is the 100,000 songs, and the other one is Milarepa's so-called biography, both of which contain songs in them. Obviously, the 100,000 songs is larger and has more, incidents that are described. So the edition that is translated into English, I don't know if there's a newer one or not, but it seems to be slightly different wording. Maybe it's based on a different Tibetan edition. But anyway, these are the lines that appear in Pabongara Rinpoche's text.
There is actually a translation.
Is there?
Yeah, there's a CC Chong.
Yeah, that's the one that I have had for a long time.
And then there's another one.
Really? Well, what's interesting is that when I've looked up the references in Gelugpa texts that are, quotes from purported to be from Milarepa's text, but especially the biographer's song, there seems to be a different edition that is maybe more familiar to Gelugpa's. I have found it, and I've actually found this exact wording. So anyway, not to dwell on that too much, but these songs are interesting. It comes from a story about Milarepa's meetings with a family, and in particular a young woman who became, or maybe already was, Milarepa's disciple, and her name was Beldar Boom. And in the Garma C.C. Chang's edition, it's called, no, I'm not going to remember it, Women's Role in the Dharma is how I translate it. Obviously, that's not a literal translation of the chapter, but if you have that, you can look it up. It's a really great story. There are other parts of it that, like, Milarepa comes to the house, and the woman's mother, or perhaps her mother-in-law, but I believe her mother, is there, and it's kind of amusing. There's an amusing song that he addresses to the older woman. This one is to the younger one, but it has a great line in it that's similar to the one about reflecting on death and future life. So it says, Ange Nyama. Ange, I believe Ange is a colloquial kind of exclamation to get someone's attention. Nyama is a word which refers to a female disciple. Beldar Boom is her name. Ange Nyama Beldar Boom. Then it says Sendang. Sen means to listen, and dang, typically people would think that means and, but sometimes Sendang, especially in spoken Tibetan, is an imperative. Sendang means listen, in the imperative. Listen to me, heed me. Chungmo means then you're well-to-do. Chukpa, mo is a negative particle. So perhaps they are landowners and they're reasonably well off. Chungmo, and Devachen means then she's a faithful one, faithful, prosperous one. Then here he says, said di way is the comparative. Compared to this life, said di way, Chima means then the future life. Shulta ring means a much longer path, much longer journey. This life is this, is a colloquialism. We say, oh, life is a journey, right? But this is saying that this life may be a journey, but future life's bigger journey. So he says, much longer trip, he's saying. Therefore, yakche. I think yak is means provisions. Che literally means chema means like powder, but it's referring to grain that has been, typically tsamba. So jakche would mean your tsamba provisions. That's a Tibetan staple. So he says jakche means your provisions. Japsu tu means jap here the same as before. It says chijap, drojap is said in the previous line, right? So here it says jap means prepare. Tu means have you done it? Japsu tu lapsam means have you prepared your provisions for this long journey? Then he says, if you haven't, japche japsu machuna. This second to last line is the conditional saying, if you have not done so, then understand jimba yimbe. Jimba means generosity. First of the 6 paramitas, giving. That is your provisions. It means that generosity will ensure in future lives that you are not destitute, that you do not find yourself in position of material need, right? So it says jimba yimbe tayan sel. So he says tayan tang jimba tang is the verb that goes with jimba. Tama literally means to send, but jimba tang means to exercise or to practice, carry out generosity. Tayan sel means then he's saying, I urge you to practice it. Practice generosity as the way of preparing the necessary provisions for future life. So that's the first one. Then the second verse is similar. It looks like I cut and pasted, for some reason, the second line, hear me, O wealthy and faithful one, is not in the second verse. It says, Anganyama peda room, the same as the first line in the first verse. Then here he says, Sed diwe chima, again, Sed diwe chima is the same as before. Compared to this life, future lives, chima means the future ones. Jibache means much more frightening. Much more frightening or much more perilous, much more dangerous future lives. Then, therefore, so their life is filled with many what should I say, risks in this life, right? Many untoward things can happen to you in this life, but compared to that, future lives is much more than perilous, much more than cause for concern. Then he says, Gelma Japsu, same way. Japsu tu laksa means have you prepared. Then Gelma means someone who will take you, like your guide, someone who knows the way, who's traveled that way before. And if you just follow that person, they will lead you safely, it's saying. That's a Gelma here. Gelma Japsu tu laksam is a question. Have you arranged for a guide to take you into the perilous future life? And if you have not, means the real guide, the one that will lead you then without fail, is hajur. Then that's interesting. This is also colloquial, not so much colloquial, but it's a very much a Tibetan phrase. Sure is the word for dharma. Then here it says hajur. Ha is a word for God. So this is a unique term. Hachir here should be understood to mean Buddhism, the divine teaching or the divine dharma. 사주인배, 재장자오. So 재장자오 means carry it out. Jeva means to practice the Dharma. Practice the Dharma now, then that virtue will ensure that your path in the future will not be fraught with peril. You will go easily and safely in the future. So what you can imagine that this is something that Milarepa was. There is this. My understanding, Milarepa as a yogi achieved a level of realization, which is sometimes talked about in tantric literature, that they have the ability to extemporaneously and spontaneously break into song and express some. It's like almost like speaking in prose is almost sort of coming from that emotional. You can imagine, a yogi singing this to a disciple. Very beautiful. Okay, so that's meant to get us started today. Then what I'd like to do before we go to the verses, again, is go back to Lamrim Chemo. And the very next section, no, I'm sorry, we skipped the benefits of reflecting on the one right after that. What page in the page 102 in this printed edition?
147.
Huh?
147.
147 in the English, if you have it. 102 in the Tibetan. So this is, I think I remember reading this for the first time, and I was really struck by it. To me, the Lamrim Chemo is like one long meditation. If you read it and you understand, can strike you as personal instruction. And if you understand it properly and you're reflecting on it as you read it, it should evoke a kind of a proper response, emotional, spiritual response. So I don't know if I can convey that as you read this, but then in my mind, that's how it should be understood. So what this topic is, it says Chiwa Jembe Lo. Chiwa Jembe Lo means which is related to recollection of death. Chiwa Jemba is the phrase for this particular practice. I always translate Jemba as recall, recollection. Many other people translate it as mindfulness.
It's okay.
And I get criticized for calling it recollection. I'm going to be stubborn and say I can live with that criticism. I think recollection is fine. I think recollection refers to quality of mind. Anyway, I won't go off on that tangent. But so Lo means the mind which is properly understanding how to reflect on death as a spiritual exercise. So the main term or the main idea that relates to death is there's meant to be some kind. Remember, we had the word jikpa last time. Jikpa means fear. In Nagarjuna's Ratnavali, he defined that secondary mental affliction of is called amara vitarka. Amara means not dying. Vitarka means the thought or the sense that you're not going to die anytime soon. That is considered a secondary mental affliction. So the tendency to sort of put off any tendency to sort of confront your mortality. Then he explains it as Chiwe. I forget what the translation is. I don't know that I have it here. What's in my notes? Oh yeah. There's funny. I put all the ones. Oh no, here it is. Okay. Chiwe jikpa midokpa. It says. So in Abhijna's text, he says. Mrityu bhaya. Mrityu means death. So chiwa. Bhaya means fear. Chiwe jikpa. And then it says ashankita. Is the state of not being apprehensive about the fear of death. Now that sounds a little bit kind of unclear. So this, I think, is an example where the word fear is meant not in the sense of the state of fear, but the fact that death is something that represents a peril. Right? So not being concerned about the peril associated with death. So we can understand that fear of death in that dual sense. Right? One is you're meant to be apprehensive about death. You're meant to be apprehensive about death because it carries the potential of some kind of danger for you in a spiritual sense. Okay, so so what is that sense of apprehension or fear that we're supposed to have about death, right? So so he doesn't use that word. He says, what is the way in which we're properly supposed to recall death? So what is the proper attitude that we're supposed to have about death? And then jidaushikeva means what sort of mind is that we're meant to generate? And so then he starts out by talking about fear. And he talks about what kind of fear it isn't. And this is very interesting to me. I remember a long time ago, very long time ago, I was translating for someone who was giving a talk on learning. And we got to this point about impermanence and as represented by death. And there was a person that was there, it was in New York, and this one person got very kind of indignant and said, what do you mean we're supposed to be afraid about our death? Isn't Buddhism supposed to, get rid of our fears? And here he is telling me I'm supposed to meditate in such a way that I'm supposed to make myself afraid. And he thought, that's all wrong. He wasn't having anything of it. So I remember the teacher didn't really have a very good answer for him. But here's the answer. Okay, so he says, you have the English?
Yeah, I'm a little bit lost.
You mean you're lost?
I'm on the next page.
They have the page numbers in brackets. They're pretty, the Tibetan page numbers.
No, the kind of mindfulness of death you should develop. The bottom of 147. Okay, so it's, yeah. Okay. So it says, so he says now, chakbakyawa means at the end. Chakbakyawa means the tendency to develop fear or even terror about death. How? He says, based on the dok here means apprehension, right? Apprehension. The fear that arises due to apprehension, a certain kind of apprehension. What kind of apprehension? So he says, then he says, by the power, literally, wangi, right? Wangi means on the strength of or due to. The fact that you have a strong attachment, for nyen means relatives. La sokpa means other things that relate to this life that can be an object of your attachment. And probably one of the biggest attachments is your own body, right? Our sense of our own identity, whether we recognize it or not, a lot of it comes from our own physical, aspect. So the idea that this body is going to somehow be jettisoned when we die, that idea can provoke in the mind a kind of sense of, the end and some kind of annihilation, some kind of loss of existence, loss of one's own being. And so the apprehension that comes from that is due to the attachment that we have to our physical existence, the pleasures, the sensory experiences that we are so attentive to in our life. So so that's in La Sokpa. The main word is Nyen, means family, like your close relatives, your immediate family, my spouse, or my children, or my grandchildren, or my father, or whatever. The thought of leaving them or losing them is, great, sense of the fear, concern. So means apprehension about being separated from them. So death is a kind of separation, right? They use that word a lot, right? To be separated from your close relatives. So that kind of fear, the fear that comes from losing everything that relates to this life, everything that we associate with this life, and the fact that we're attached to it, the fact that the prospect of being separated from it, losing it, for the average worldly person kind of means the end of everything. And so that causes a great sense of apprehension. So that's apprehension about fear, right? So if that's the kind of fear that we generate in relation to death, that has nothing to do with this practice, okay? He says that the person who hasn't practiced the path at all has no understanding of spiritual instruction and has not cultivated it in any degree at all. This kind of has no knowledge, clueless about the Dharma. This is just ordinary worldly kind of mind. Okay, that is a way of being afraid or frightened about our death that is experienced by people who have not practiced the Dharma whatsoever at all. Therefore, so he says, that's not what we're trying to develop here when in thinking about death. That has no relevance here. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to scare you. Because of your attachment to this life, we're not trying to scare you with the prospect of being separated from things that you hold dear. Okay. And then so that's a good starting point. And then he says, Ona? Ona means, well then, if that's the case, gain. So what is the kind of fear that you are trying to provoke or evoke in the practitioner by teaching this instruction? And this is really the meat of it. He says, Le dang nyomon be wangi lu langba tamje never chua le mande. So that's the first clause, and then it has made be, which means shows reason. Okay, so he says here tamje means everyone. Tamje means all, but here means every person who has taken on a body, literally. Right, so someone who has been born, who has a physical existence that is created by the power of karma and mental affliction. So that means everyone who takes birth in a samsaric way, right? All of those, never means it is absolutely certain that they are going to die. Chua le mande means cannot avoid dying. Chua le mande means you cannot go beyond it. So it means you cannot escape it. Here it means, although deva means to transcend, but here it means you cannot escape or avoid it. Mande be. Therefore, delachak bakyang reshigla gang minum. So he says that the prospect, and in fact, the very first meditation is never chua, right? In the Lama instruction, in the Lama instruction for death, you should know this. There's a Lawasum. Lawasum means 3 root points. And then Gusen Gu means 9. Then it says reasons, but it means 9 sort of individual topics that relate to those 3 categories. And then finally, Takjevasum. Takjevasum means 3 things, 3 kind of determinations that you should make in relation to those 3 main categories. So the first one is Nebarchua. Nebarchua means death is inescapable. So face it head on. I am going to die, and contemplate that fact. Don't try to avoid it. Don't try to put it out of your mind. So the first verse that we read last week falls into that category. Right? So we should all feel that we are subject to the Lord of Death, and it's imminent. He's like an executioner with a sword raised, ready to lop off our head. We should feel that kind of imminence about our mortality. So since most of us are not familiar with that, and when you first start to do that, naturally it's going to make you apprehensive, right? So here he's addressing that. He's saying, given the fact that when you recognize that, it's going to cause you some kind of, disquiet. He says, you have to do that. Understood, right? Implied. You have to do that. And then he says, reshikla. Reshikla means for the time being, or for a certain period of time, ganminu means you can't get rid of that. You can't stop that. You have to just experience that. You have to accept that kind of apprehension, and even if it's uncomfortable, right? Minu means however. Means acknowledging that fact. However, it says that's really not it either. It's not just the fact that we're going to die and we can't do anything about it. Rather, he says, Weikyang means, however, he says, this is the main point. Dun means purpose or meaning, right? That relates to future lives. Dun means those things, those important things that relate to future lives. So that's the Dharma is about that. So Dun means those things which will benefit you in future lives. The Dharma is nothing but the Dharma, right? So the third category among those 3 root categories is Chuetse. Chuetse means when you die, when you are at the point of death. Cherma tok means other than Dharma, except for Dharma. Hangi kyang pen means nothing else will help you when you die, except however much Dharma you have been able to carry out prior to that moment. So from the point of view of Dharma, that's the only thing that will benefit future life, right? So then Chime Dun, then he says, what are Chime Dun? Now he mentions here there are 3 kinds of Chime Dun. And they are, in fact, Gibu Chumu's Chime Dun, Gibu Jing's Chime Dun, Gibu Chembo's Chime Dun. So future goal, which relates to lesser practitioner, then that is to avoid unfavorable rebirth. Jing's Chime Dun is to understand that it's possible to escape from samsara and to be then striving to attain that. Then that's Jing. And third one is then not to feel that that's not sufficient, that we are related to all sentient beings, and we have an obligation to all sentient beings to either take them with us or to make ourselves capable of leading them or ensuring that they can also not only achieve liberation, but they also can achieve perfection, their fulfillment, ultimate fulfillment of supreme enlightenment. So those are then Chimeda, all of them. So here he says, what are they? So this is what is it? What do you call it? Next to things, apposition. These are in apposition, right? Chimedun, what are they? Ngendru Gyu Gokpa. So there's one example, right? Ngendru Gyu Gokpa means in order to ensure favorable rebirth, you have to stop committing the causes that will force you to be reborn in lower realms. Stop doing bad things. Nguyen means then achieve the higher realms rebirth, right? Then that, in order to achieve that, you have to engage in the positive deeds that will be the cause for gaining favorable rebirth. Then Ngelek is, these are, Nguyen and Ngelek are technical Buddhist terms. Ngelek is usually translated as ultimate goodness or definite goodness. But it actually literally means that which there is nothing higher. So the nge is not better. Nothing better than this is the highest goal is then that term applies to moksha, liberation, nirvana, hinana nirvana, and also to enlightenment, Buddha. So usually you can say ngonto and ngele, just those two. Ngonto literally means an elevated position. So it means higher realms rebirth. Ngelek means an ultimate goal of liberation or Buddhahood. Then ngonto ngelek gyu mandrupar chiwa. Mandrupar chiwa then jibbacha. So this is the thing properly that you should fear. He says mandrupar chiwa. Mandrupar is adverbial. It means without having accomplished something. To die without having accomplished the cessation of the causes for lower realms rebirth, or accomplish the positive causes that will bring higher realms rebirth or ultimate goal. So the fear that you will die before you're able to accomplish any of those examples of chimedra, right? The things that relate to future life. That is what we should be apprehensive about. Okay? Not fear itself, but dying before we've been able to accomplish these goals. Totally different thing. So it gives you 3 examples of fear relating to death. First one is rank, ordinary, worldly person's reaction to having this life taken away. That fear. Says that has nothing to do with Dharma. Second one is, if you face death, then that prospect may cause you apprehension by the idea of not knowing what lies beyond. Then that is unsettling. Then he says, for the time being, you can't really do anything about that. But that's really not the main goal either of thinking about impermanence. The main goal is thinking about what an unfortunate thing it would be if you were to allow your life to end without having accomplished anything of value from the point of view of Dharma. The fear that that might happen, that's what you should be concerned about. So that's the fear of death, fear relating to death that you should develop. Well, that's pretty clear. And I think, it's the distinctions that are useful. Okay? Then he says, now, so that's the assertion. Jigbachate means, in fact, that's the thing which you should generate fear about. Then he says, te is a conjunction. Then he says, regarding that, delani, regarding that fear. De takpa samna, de takpa samna, he says, if you reflect on that fear, right? If you generate that fear and you reflect on it, dedak Dedak means those goals that were mentioned there, right? To stop yourself from engaging in non-virtuous deeds that will bring lower realms birth, to accomplish the causes that will bring higher realms rebirth, and even the higher goals of liberation and omniscience, right? Dedak, that's what those refers to here. Drup to year means they can be accomplished. Drup to year, therefore, chikar mitrak par char year. So then he says, because you can do something about that fear of dying without having accomplished something, you can do something about it, meaning you can pursue those goals and you can accomplish them. And therefore, if you do, chikar means then when you're on the verge of dying, when you are at death's door, literally in the mouth of death. So it means at the point of death, then you can face death mitaka, without fear. Mitaka. Char means it's possible to bring that about. That you do not, when you are actually facing death, you can do so calmly, peacefully. Then in the highest way, even joyfully, thinking something very good is going to happen. That's if you're a good practitioner. He says, Dön dedak mandrubna. Dön dedak means those same goals or those same meanings that were mentioned. Mandrubna means if you fail to accomplish them, means then broadly speaking, you will not be able to escape from samsara. Kebardu, and more specific. So that is the it kind of samsara represents universally suffering, right? The truth of suffering applies to samsara as a whole. Then, so they would say chidam chedragi dungel, right? They would say samsara suffering has general aspect, means it applies throughout, and chedra means then particular aspects of samsara have suffering, and that's usually referring to the lower realms, where the suffering is particularly severe and then awful. So here it says, "Kebardu niendorhum." Says if you fail to act on the recognition that you have a little bit of time to try to do something, then you will have to remain in samsara, and in the worst case, you may have to fall into the lower realms. Therefore, so this is the opposite. He's saying he's saying these are the goals. You should be afraid to die without having accomplished them, because if you do accomplish them, you can face death calmly. If you don't accomplish them, then when you face death, what the prospect is, at the very least, you're going to stay in samsara. At the very worst, you're going to fall into the lower realms, and therefore, then you're going to face the fear of what comes in the next life, right? You're going to die in a state of fear, and because of that, Gerba means then you'll feel remorse, you'll feel regret. Oh, if I had only done this. Oh, if I'd only done that. Oh, I wish I had done more good things with my life. That is so that is what we should try to avoid, right? So it's talking about, we aren't at death's door, but we should feel apprehensive about not accomplishing something between now and that point, because we can do something about afterwards, and if we do, we can die peacefully. On the other hand, if we don't do anything, then we're going to be writhing and clutching at our breasts and tearing out our hair and doing all kinds of woe is me kind of feelings when we die. So that's not good. Don't means you will be tormented by regret at death. Okay, so this is the description. Then now he gives a quotation. He says, "Get up, late." Get up is the Jatakamala. Jatakamala is a literary work. It is based on ancient Jatakas tales, some of the early Jatakas, which are usually rather short descriptions of various events that are meant to depict different lives of Buddha prior to his enlightenment. But the Jatakamala is more than that. Jatakamala takes these basic stories, turns them into a kind of Dharma, an opportunity to present Dharma. They're written by Ayashura, who was one of the major Buddhist poets. So I brought, this is, the Sanskrit of it is still available. So the Lamrim literature, the Lamrim tradition is something that is part of what's known as the Kadampa tradition. Kadampa tradition is the tradition established by Atisha when he came to Tibet. And so there are different lines of the Lamrim teaching through the Kadampas, so different forms of the Lamrim teaching. One of them is called Shumbawa. Shumbawa means the Kadampa lineage that relies on texts, main important text. Shum means text. And so in Kadampa lineage, there are Kadam Shum Juk, 6 main texts. Those are then Gerab is this Jatakamala, and Tsom Chedijovitom is the Udanavarga, which is sort of sometimes referred to as the Sanskrit Dhammapada. There are a lot of verses. It's not identical, but there are maybe significant number of those verses are identical in 2 collections. So that's 2. Then Sagin, Chinese way Sa means the Bodhisattva Bhumi, and Mahayana Sutra. No, what is it? Sutra Alankar, Mahayana Sutra Alankar. One of the 5 Maitreya texts, which is sort of a companion text with Bodhisattva Bhumi. And then the last 2 are Junjuk and Labduk. Junjuk is the Vajrayana Avatara, and Shiksha Samjaya. Both of are associated with Shantideva. So those are kind of, all of those are major resources for Lamrim tradition. So anyway, the Jatakamala, there are only 34 stories. Yes.
Can you recommend an English edition of that? Oh, that is it.
There's a collection. Somebody named Clay, I believe he's English, funded a project to translate Sanskrit texts. There's a lot of different. Most of them are not Buddhists, but there are some Buddhists, and one of them is this Jatakamala.
Who's the
May I
publisher?
take a photograph of
It's
that?
called Clay Sanskrit Library, published in conjunction with New York University Press. I don't know, most of you maybe won't care, but these are bilingual, Sanskrit and English. It's got Sanskrit on one side, it's got English on the.
I'll get to the Sanskrit some other time.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, they're written by very well-known Sanskrit scholars. So they're translated directly from the original. So they're the English. It's meant to be very readable, and so I recommend them. There's another version of them. Who's the person? Some named Speyer. It's a very old edition, and it's not spoken of highly. The English is very dated. You've probably seen that.
I've many different versions.
Yeah.
I've always
Yeah, it's hard.
so-
But this is very readable. Okay, so these three verses are from the Jataka 31, which is the Sutta Soma Jataka. It's a beautiful story. I'll won't take the time to talk about it. It's about truth. I'll tell you this much about it. Maybe it'll inspire you to look for the story. It starts out with the Bodhisattva, whose name is Sutta Soma, who was he highly reveres the teachings of wise persons. So there's a word, I forget what it is in the beginning, but it's some kind of, like the, what do you call them? Like the, like excellent sayings, but of religious purpose that wise persons give, and they're very valuable. And he gives gold to teacher to receive them. So he goes to this park where he intends to receive some teachings, and he does in fact receive teachings. He gives something 1,000 pieces of gold for each one, and he receives 4 teachings. While he's at the park, he is kidnapped by a human being who is a cannibal, who murders people and eats their flesh. And that his name is Saudasa. And he's this horrible person. And so he takes the Bodhisattva away and goes to his lair where they're, bloody and filled with bones. And he's preparing to to cook and eat the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva starts weeping. So I'm telling you the story, which I don't want to do. So he says, so Saudasa sort of laughs at him, oh, you're crying because you're, lamenting the fact that I'm going to eat you. And he says, no. He says, I'm lamenting that either he didn't give the money, or at any rate, he left something undone in relation to those sayings. And so he says to the Sutta Soma says to Saudasa, let me go. I'll go and do what I need to do, and then I'll come back and you can eat me. And Saudasa says, yeah, sure. Really? You think I'm going to fall for that? And then he says, I am a person who upholds truth. I wouldn't say this to you if I wouldn't, live up to it. So then Saudasa says, okay, I don't really believe you, but I'm going to test you. And he lets him go. So then he comes back after taking care of things that he needed to do. And Saudasa is shocked. So he starts talking to him. At that point, then Sutta Soma tells him these verses about why he's not afraid of dying. And so this is very apropos. And then at the end, he converts Saudasa, which is it's really beautiful. That part of the story comes in the beginning of the Lama teaching. It's taught in being on teaching because Sutta Soma is going to teach Saudasa the excellent sayings that he had received. And then he tells Saudasa that what he has to do to be respectful. And then, anyway, Saudasa goes through the conversion. But anyway, these are the 3 verses from the story. And so it says, Rabdu Jimkyang. Here it says, Ne Minu. I'm not sure if that's correct. Ne means, I think it's De Minu. De maybe is, remember the Awadasa De means like to transcend. So the Rabdu Jim means with great effort, even with great effort. Deminu means it cannot be overcome. That's death. There's one of the sayings, one of the meditations in the fact that death is certain is to say that there's no way to escape death. You can't outrun it. You can't buy it off. You can't. There's no medicine that will. There's no spell that you can cast that will stop death. So it's saying death is unstoppable. So Rabdu Jimkyang Deminu means talking about death. or I mean nu. Then ganla means for someone. This is like the someone here is talking about the bodhisattva or any dharma person. So it says, I have some paper here, it's probably better. Give me a second. Right. He says, it's not for someone, it's that which. I'm sorry. So here we're talking about death. It's death. The word death doesn't appear in the verse, but it's the relative pronoun that which is referring to death. That which cannot be overcome even by the greatest effort. So no matter, you can try as hard as you want, but you can't overcome it. Then he says, what use is it? And now this is beautiful. This is in the second half of the verse. It says, how does the Tibetan say? This says, Chosu mirua. Chosu mirua means there's no remedy for it. There's no remedy. But it's not saying there's no remedy for death. It's saying, it's adjectival. It's saying, then here it says, Jikshin darwa. Jik means to be terrified, frightened. Darwa means to be cowardly. Then here it means cowardly as in the sense of, so the idea is that sometimes when you're overcome with fear, it leads to inaction. You know, so like a wild animal is going to be caught by a predator. Sometimes it'll just like frozen in fear, and it can't escape, and then it's captured. So here it's saying that kind of cowardice, so it's a cowering cowardice created by fear, right? And then it says, Chosu mirua, and it says that kind of cowardice, it says, is no remedy whatsoever, right? So to cower in fear at death, which cannot be averted, he says, what use is that? Huh? Right? So this is Sutta Soma saying to Saudasa, death is inevitable, and to have that kind of fear that leads to inaction and just sort of impotence is pointless, he says. So why should I have that kind of fear? He's saying, right? That's verse number 1, right? Darjabi Dela Pema Jishigyo means what benefit is that? What good is that? What good is it to just be, terrified at death in such a way that you don't do anything about it? The first one. Then the second verse is actually here now he's talking about ordinary persons again. He says, Detar jikden cheni latakna, and this is actually not a verse in the text. It is kind of a, what do you call it? Kind of like it's a lead-in. It's a prose phrase that leads into the next verse, and it says, having that reaction, the ordinary person who has that reaction, and then those persons who contemplate, and here it says, Jikten Chunyi means literally means the way of the world. So the way of the world means those sort of universal laws in the world, universal principles. Here it's talking specifically about mortality. So those persons who have considered such principles as our mortality, then he says, how do they react? And this is kind of a repeating a little bit the first verse. He says, then the person who is not cultivating Dharma at all, and yet they have a sense of the nature of karma and the prospects of what awaits them if they haven't practiced the Dharma. So here it says, right? Minam means persons who have considered the principles of the world, right? Means where are we here? Oh yeah. Then it says Gerba means regret, remorse. They are overcome by remorse. They are feeling remorse. Then Dikpacheva literally means because they've engaged in non-virtue. And so they've been, the Sanskrit's a little bit more poetic. It's saying they have engaged in, they have been attached to, they have had tendency and inclination to commit non-virtuous deeds. And because of that, they are feeling regret when they contemplate their death. Then that's one. Then the second one is they have not. Then how is it? I should read the Tibetan. Gewelekyang lekbar yong mache. Gewele means then virtuous deeds. Actually, you can see how this fits before he said Chime Dun. Remember that he mentions 4 things. He says, Ngendro Gyu Gokpa, right? Those are what we need to do. Ngendro Gyu Gokpa. Ngendro Gyu means causes for being reborn in the lower realms. Gokpa means to put a stop to them, right? So here is saying the person who has not led a spiritual life, they feel remorse at the virtue they have done. So that means they didn't counteract that quality. They didn't stop engaging in non-virtue here, right? This is a direct reference to this. Then the second one is, means moreover, they haven't engaged in or they haven't exerted themselves in relation to virtuous deeds. So they recognize that. And that's another cause for remorse. But when they recognize that, then that's the second one. That's Ngontogyu. Ngontogyu means being reborn in the higher realms. For engaging in virtue brings about that result. So this is the second one, right? Then Chime tsela dunge jung dok, right? Chime tsela means in the future life, right? Chime tsela means future life or future world. They're going to have to experience suffering. Jungdu dok means they're apprehensive about having to experience suffering in the future. Right? So this is the consequence of not stopping their non-virtue and not engaging in virtue. Chiwargyurwe jikpa. Chiwargyurwe jikpa means the fear of their impending death, that they are going to die, they're about to die. Mongbagyur means then Mongba usually means they are ignorant, but actually here Mongba refers to a sense of being kind of paralyzed. And the word means stiff, unable to act, paralyzed in fear, right? So they're paralyzed in fear at the prospect of their death. They don't know what to do. They just sit there and are, overcome by terror, and they basically are unable to do anything to benefit themselves. So he's saying this is what the ordinary world, that's what typically their experience in relation to death if they don't do anything, right? If they don't try to take any measures to ensure that these consequences are not likely. That's the second verse. Then the third verse is then referring to himself. He says, I'm not like that. He says, gangle is a relative pronoun that's saying for reason of which, because of which. Dagni dagi gyurgyurba means by reason of which I would feel remorse, right? I would need to feel remorse, right? Which are the reasons that were just given. I engaged in non-virtue in my life. I didn't cultivate virtue. Then that would give me cause to be remorseful at my death. He says, those reasons, Deni dagi jebar yoma jen. And Sutta Sama is saying to Sadasa, I do not recall. Here it's not coming to mind. I do not see myself as having lived that kind of life. Says, it says, moreover, I have made it part of my nature. That is Rabdu Gombarche. It's literally, it means I've practiced, I've familiarized myself, or I've cultivated. But the Sanskrit actually means to make it part of your nature, to make it ingrained in you. Garbole means literally means the white dharma. It means the virtuous dharma or the pure dharma. I have ingrained it in me, right? So he says, Chola nena, therefore, Chola nena chiwe sushiji. So he says, for one who is established in the dharma, then what person would be fearful of death? So it means if you have engaged in virtue, then you can face death fearlessly without any apprehension. So these three verses are the source for what Tsongkhapa said in the beginning. It doesn't mean, those three levels of fear. It means the third of those three, not the first two that were mentioned. And these three verses are given as a scriptural source that is expressing that point. Then he says, then I'll skip this. This is actually the last verse. Shibya means 400 verses. This is the last verse in the first chapter of Aryadeva's 25 verses. So don't want to get ahead of ourselves. He's saying the same thing. He says, Chida layan galajik. So it says, if you are practiced properly, why would you have any reason to fear death? So the point is, if you cultivate death, if you cultivate the prospect of death and the need to do something before that death comes, and then in fact do something, then you got nothing to fear. So and that's the message of how we should approach this instruction about reflecting on the impermanence of death. Now here he makes the last statement, which I think also in the very beginning, he said that there was that second fear. That second fear was that everybody who takes birth, literally he says lu langba. Lu langba means who takes on a body, right? Who is born, speaking of humans, who's born in, what is the word? Who is a mammal and is born in the womb of a mother and develops a physical body, right? So that's a lulangba. So any such person, not only mammals, the birds and other beings as well, right? Means if they take birth, if they take on a physical form by the power of karma and mental afflictions, they must die. Everyone dies, right? Even the arhats eventually give up their samsaric body. Then there are Tashi means the four ends of all created entities, all causally produced entities. The end of birth is death. The end of meeting is separation. The end of rising, becoming prosperous, is fall, right? And what's the last one? I don't remember. Anyway, main one was the death. Death is inevitable. Jigitashi. Then here, now he says, that second fear in particular, Lutang, Longchurtang, Nyurdu Jawar, Dun Misao. So, this actually very, it has a very subtle psychological component to it. I mentioned to you before that a lot of our identity derives from our relationship to our physical body. If we identify ourselves more with our bodies than with our minds, then that kind of fear of death will be more intense, because that body is, we're going to lose that body at some point, right? So here he says, not only our body, ludang, longja means our wealth, right? Then most people, many people, then they're concerned about accumulating wealth, and then just the fourth one. The fourth one is the end of all accumulation is that it's decay, it's loss. So he says, longja nyurdu dawar demisao means if you recognize that your body and your wealth, and the third in the third category, third root category of death, meditation on death, this thing that says nothing but dharma will benefit you at death. So it gives you three prime examples of things that we cling to. One is family and friends. So they may gather around you at your deathbed, no matter how much they wail, they're not going to stop you from going, right? Not only, well, anyway, I don't want to go off on that, but there's much to what we do for the sake of our family and friends, good and bad. Then that can also be a source of remorse. So they don't help you in terms of dharma. Then long term, however much wealth you have, kangarchik means not even one nickel can you take with you when you go to the next life. So it's going to stay. And then it says, rangi lukang, right? Then the thing which is closest to your own physical body, then that's going to abandon you at the end of your life as well. So don't cling to it. Your body is a vehicle, something that you use, but don't identify with it strongly. What's more important is what you do with your mind. And if you can give up your attachment to your body, then that also will put you at ease. So here it says, body, wealth, you're definitely, dun misao means there's no doubt you are very soon you're going to lose them. That means death. Yang da yang du mitakpa samnani means if you think about it, if you reflect on it repeatedly, the more you think about it, you think about this body which I'm in and which I think is part of me so much. If I focus on the fact that someday it's not going to be part of me anymore, right? So if it's not going to be part of me anymore, don't cling to it more than you need to. Don't cling to it a lot. Huh? Same thing with your wealth. It has some, short-term practical use, but to be overly concerned about money, this is really a bad thing. If you think about impermanence in that way, in that these things, focus on wealth, focus on even your own body, focus on your family, focus on your relatives, all the things that you're attached to. Then if you think about the fact that ultimately you're going to have to give them up. So then if that's true, then it's inappropriate to feel such strong attachment for them now. So kind of try to let go of that attachment as much as possible. If you do that, samnani, Dedala minjawa rewe seba dok. It says, okay? Dedala minjawa rewa. Okay, minjawa rewa means that hope, that vain hope that you not be separated from them. Oh, I wish I weren't going to be separated from my family. Oh, I wish I weren't going to have to give up my body. Oh, I wish I don't have to lose all my whatever wealth I have. That is a silly hope, right? So dedala minjawa rewe. That hope comes from attachment to those things. Then that if you focus very kind of matter of factly, this is temporary, not going to be forever, and death could come any moment, even today. Then that attachment to those things of this life can be averted, can be certainly can be reduced. And if you focus on the fact that they are useless from the point of view of Dharma, then you can, in fact, let go of them, to use the modern vernacular. And if you do that, then this is the payoff. Then the kind of dua means mental torment. At the prospect of being separated from, of losing them, it's just, it won't come. You won't have that fear. Remember, he said at the second fear, he said, for the time being, at the beginning of the practice, you still have that attachment. You have to practice the instruction. If you practice the instruction, you can overcome that attachment. If you overcome that attachment, then that second kind of fear, you won't have it anymore. You can actually get rid of it. It means what it is a benefit of being introspective. If you focus on that your mind is a more important part of your being than your body. What you do with your mind. Your mind is like a, I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but the mind is like maybe this is sort of an odd phrase. It's like a magical machine. Okay, I don't want to say machine because that sounds kind of, not speaking in a favorable way. But the mind is something that has great power. If you know how to manipulate it, if you know how to activate positive minds, if you know how to control it, if you know how to cultivate minds, and if you are able to do that, that's what matters. What happens with your body doesn't matter much. So if you focus on that, if you focus on your mind and try to inhabit that part of your being and give less importance to the physical side of it, then it is the same. A lot of your anxiety can be overcome. Talk for the class. But I think, to me, that's a very beautiful, almost like a meditation. It is a meditation on what's the proper way to approach this this topic, this instruction. Okay, so that's why I thought it was worth going over it. Okay, so now we can go to Aryadeva's text.
You want to have a 5-minute break?
Is it time?
2:30? Or not? Your choice.
2 minutes.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Short. Very short.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, here we are back. You gonna go to Gelsup, Jay?
Yes.
You want a cookie?
I have one, thank you.
That one's for me.
Oh, okay. Okay, ready? So we got to, in Tibetan, page 5, at the end, the latter part of the commentary on the first verse, there is this this element of Chandrakirti's commentary where it's interesting. If you read the English translation of his commentary, he makes reference to wrote a commentary to Aryadeva's 400 verses. No such commentary survives, certainly not in Sanskrit and not in Tibetan. In fact, the only Indian commentary is Chandrakirti. But what he says is, and I think if I'm not mistaken, he says that the first 8 chapters only so the first half of the text. Now, every verse, there are allusions to stories, and they're given as illustrations. So it says perna or shino. Let's see, what's the first one here? In the first chapter. Okay, so here he says, okay, so, yeah, it says, Marme dekbe rabdu jambar chebe gyabodang, jipadan chebe gongdu debe mishino. Is it shino? Shino means like. Okay, so it means that it's that these are references that are illustrative of the verse. Now, and I think it's my sense that those phrases are, in fact, maybe I speculate that they're actually quotes from Dharmadasa's commentary, and then Chandrakirti goes on to actually explain it, because just that reference alone doesn't give you a clue as to what they mean or how to understand it. So having said that, they're challenging. They're challenging because the Chandrakirti's explanation of them in Tibetan is in language that's sometimes almost impossible, really, I think, to figure out. They're also very, they're kind of curious because they have a certain almost, I don't want to say quirkiness, but they are unusual, shall we say, in how they are meant to illustrate what the verse says. So think of the first verse, right? The first verse. By the way, I sent you my translation of the first verse? Did I?
You did.
I did, yeah. Someone at the end of last class asked for a translation of the first verse. So
Did I not send that out?
I don't know.
apologize.
I'm just saying.
I'll double check.
I don't.
Did I? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh,
I don't
so
know.
can you read it?
Yeah, you sent.
Uh,
Do you have it?
I'll find it. Give me a minute. Sorry.
Yeah. So here, this is on page 5.
Which chapter are you in, Art?
I'm reading from Gesabje's text. What page is it?
It's either 66 or 67.
66.
Thank you, Andy.
So at the bottom of the verse, it is like the following analogy. Yeah. So this is Gesabje making reference to these stories, these allusions and the descriptions of them or explanations of them that Chandrakirti gives. There's you find it? You read it.
It says, for one subject to the Lord of the triple world, for one subject to the Lord of the triple world,
Yeah.
himself the
Inexorable.
inexorable bringer of death. What could be more ruinous than to remain at rest like a person that is secure?
Yeah. So I just say that because these stories are meant to illustrate that. So the idea is how foolish, how inappropriate, how wrong it is not to take note of our mortality, and as we talked about today. So these are stories that are supposed to illustrate that. So here we have, it says Perna, and then it says Lombo. Lombo means a minister, right? A certain minister. Gebo Marme Dekba. Gebo Marme Dekba literally means a torchbearer, right? Marme means a lamp. Gebo, the king's torchbearer. So maybe, someone in the king's court that are holding up lamps. Then he doesn't tell the whole story behind it, but presumably the king showed favor to this minister, and these members of the court, these sort of what do you call them? Huh?
Courtiers?
Well, except that they're doing sort of simple tasks. They're just holding a lamp. They're not of any royalty or anything like that.
Household.
Yeah, part of the staff. They get jealous of the fact that the king has shown favor to this one minister, and so they conspire to falsely suggest to the king that this minister is not worthy of that, good treatment, and in fact, maybe he's done something that is worthy of him being executed. They conspire to do that. So it says here, Kachi Guarmachebe. Guarmachebe means they were not pleased with this minister. So it's saying here that the ministers displeased those lamp bearers. Therefore, Dedagi, it probably should be instrumental there. It means they. I mean, those lamp bearers. Lombo, Sabar Gurwa Detar, Gebo Lopar Zinduchuk. Gebo Lopar Zinduchuk means they caused the king to have a wrong idea, right? Lopar Zimba means falsely. Zimba means to believe something about the minister such that Sabar Gurwa, he should be executed. Right? So they conspired to say that he did something treasonous and the king ought to kill him. Jukla, Lumbergang, Gerber, said Dogne. And then the minister, out of concern that the king was going to kill him, Jimba Dangcheba Tar, then he exercised great care. Jimba means usually in it's a mental quality of great some kind of great effort. Jumba Danchia Batar. Then Rangchak means he himself. Bhagya Lanete. Bhagya is that quality of I translate this as mindfulness. This is apramada. Apramada is a very important Buddhist virtue. I think I have a handout for that. Yeah. So it says, it means then that minister, because the king gave him a test, which if he failed, he would be executed. And that's part of the story. And so in order to pass the test, he had to show great mindfulness. Chidagi Minerva. Chidagi, death. Minerva means to avoid death's harm or avoid being harmed by death. Jumbar Chao means he made such effort. Now, I tried to find the exact canonical reference to this story, and I wasn't able to. I have this vague thing in my mind that sometime like maybe 30 years ago, we read a story in which was in fact the detailed account that's being referenced here. And so my belief, my recollection is, I hope this is not just fantasy in my mind or delusion or what is it? A hallucination, but I seem to recall that what happened is they, the members of the court, conspired, and it told false things about the minister. The king got upset with him and said, "No, I don't remember how or why this test was devised, but the test was you have to hold a pot of oil filled to the very brim."
We did talk about this. Yes.
Do you remember where it was?
I don't, but.
I remember
This
the
was a
story
couple years
immediately.
ago.
Yeah, there's something.
Do you have the test?
Nah,
Oh, I wish I could find it. I don't know where it is. It might be in the, Vinaya literature, but I don't remember what. So then there was something which was done to distract the minister who's holding his own. He had to, pass through some area, and would be something that would, if he didn't pay attention, he would be distracted and he would spill. And walking behind him is an executioner who has a sword raised.
yeah, that's right.
That's the story.
Yeah,
You remember
I
that?
remember this story.
I
Yeah.
can't find where that story came from.
Isn't this in?
What? Well, anyway, if you can find that story, I will.
He
I
says
will-
it's Shantideva.
Huh? You think it's in Shantideva?
Richard thinks
Okay,
it's Shantideva.
Well, anyway,
Somebody else quotes it. That's for
Shantideva
sure.
makes reference to it, so
Yeah.
it doesn't tell the whole story.
really?
Yeah, he says it is as if I were menaced by holding oil menaced by someone with a sword. It's in there on his way of life.
Yeah.
A passing reference.
Okay.
There's not-
Maybe we could look at one of the commentaries. Getsaj wrote a commentary to that as well. I don't know the Indian. Anyway, it'd be really great to find that source. So here is a Hinayana Sutra, which is called At Sedaka. This is in the Sutta Nipata. Did I
Yeah,
just gave you,
That was last week's.
this is a
handouts.
handout.
Yep,
Okay, so it says, I'll read it because it's very
like this.
apropos, and I think if it's not the exact reference for this story, it's very similar. So it says, I'm reading this translation. I've heard that on one occasion, what's that? This is, thus have I heard, this is the opening statement, right? The Blessed One was staying among the Sumbas. Now there is a Sumban town named Sedaka. There the Blessed One addressed the monks. Monks, oh monks. Yes, Lord, the monks responded to him. The Blessed One said, suppose, monks, that a large crowd of people were to come thronging together saying, the beauty queen, and suppose that the beauty queen were highly accomplished at singing and dancing, so that an even greater crowd would come thronging saying, the beauty queen is singing, the beauty queen is singing. Because this is not the exact same story, but so he says, then a man would come along desiring life and shrinking from death, desiring pleasure and abhorring pain. They would say to him, now look here, mister, you must take this bowl filled to the brim with oil and carry it on your head in between the great crowd and the beauty queen. A man with a raised sword will follow right behind you, and wherever you spill even a drop of oil, right there will he cut off your head. Now what do you think, monks? Would that man, not paying attention to the bowl of oil, let himself get distracted outside? No, Lord. Then it says, I have given you this parable to convey a meaning. The meaning is this. The bowl filled to the brim with oil stands for mindfulness. Now here mindfulness is not a bagyo. This is Dremba. Mindfulness immersed in the body. So this is being mindful of your, physical form. Thus you should train yourselves. We will develop mindfulness immersed in the body. We will pursue it. Hand it the reins. Take it as a basis, steady it, consolidate, and undertake it well. So saying you should be, reflective about your physical being and be careful. That is how you should train yourself. So this is a story which is not the exact reference to this, but the idea of having to carry an oil on the head and being at risk of being killed if you didn't, carry it carefully, is what's the reference here in the Chandakirti and this allusion that Dharmadasa made. So that is saying Bhagyo Latnete. So in the commentary, and both in Chandakirti and here, we should practice Bhagyo. Now Bhagyo is this virtue apramada, right? Then there are two terms. One is pramada without the prefix, and one is apramada. So pramada is cognate to the English word mad, to be like wild mad. And so pramada means a person who is wild, who is heedless, who is rash, who doesn't think before they act. So that is one of the secondary mental afflictions. So apramada, the a prefix is a negative, privative. It doesn't simply mean not rash. It means the antithesis of rashness. So sometimes it's translated as heedfulness. I translate it as mindfulness. I don't mean it mindfulness like the mindfulness movement. I mean, so mindfulness, I think I mentioned this in the first class, so I'm not going to go down that road. But this state of mind is defined in the Abhidharma as an application of 4 mental qualities. So the 3 virtuous ones are avoidance of attachment or avoidance of desire, avoidance of hatred, and avoidance of ignorance. So, and then the 4th one is effort. So basically, if you find yourself in any circumstance where you are at risk of developing desire, or developing hatred, or developing ignorance, then you should you should exert yourself. You should make effort to apply their antidote, which is any one of these 3 virtuous qualities. Now, these things I'm saying, usually they're translated non-attachment, non-hatred, and absence of ignorance. But that's passive, and that's not what they are. They are actually virtuous qualities which we have to cultivate. We have to cultivate by our Dharma knowledge. We have to sort of build up a kind of emotional force which we can tap into and activate it, make it manifest in order to counteract attachment. So it's like if we find ourselves in a situation where attachment is tempting us, or we are maybe prone to develop attachment, we have to reach into the store of that quality, which is the avoidance of attachment, call it up, and let it sort of push away any tendency to develop attachment. So, coupling effort with that exercise of trying to call forth the absence of attachment or hatred or ignorance is the exercise of practicing heedfulness. So it requires that you recognize the situations that may present themselves, and then you take action not to fall victim to them. That's one side of mindfulness. The other side of mindfulness is if you are not in a situation where those kinds of dangers present themselves, if you're in a neutral situation, then you shouldn't remain idle. You should take advantage of that free opportunity to then do everything you can to cultivate a strong, virtuous mental quality, whatever it might be. So it could be, cultivating the, impermanence, for instance. So that's what it's saying. That quality was what that person had to apply. So there were many distractions. So the person has to realize that if he allows himself to be drawn away by attachment to something that might otherwise draw his attention, then he suffers the danger of making himself vulnerable to committing non-virtue and dying without having practiced Dharma and so on. That's kind of the message there. So, so the famous verse, which actually Chandrakirti quotes at the very end of this verse, of his commentary to the first verse, is this famous verse. It's in the Dhammapada. It's the first verse in the 4th chapter of the Udanavarga. I told you that's one of the 6 Kadampa texts. So this is it says apramado hyamrtapadam pramado mrityuna padam. The first one is apramado means mindfulness. Amrtapadam means it is the state, the deathless state, or the deathless way. It's translated as the way to, or the way to deathlessness. The commentary says, so amrta means deathlessness. And the commentaries say amrta means nirvana. Nirvana being the deathless state. Then pada, commentaries say, is the means or the way to reach that. So it's the truth of the past and the truth of cessation. So practicing mindfulness is the way to nirvana. Pramado means the opposite, right? Heedlessness, mrityuna padam. And so then that is the way of death. That one is spiritually committing suicide, so to speak. Then that's the first half. Then the second half of the verse says, apramata. Apramata is now using the past participle of heedful, and it's in the plural nominative, means those who are heedful, or those who have become heedful. Those who have become heedful, nam riante, they do not die. Pramataha, those who are heedless, those who remain heedless, sada mrtaha, they are forever dead. So this is a very famous verse, and kind of it's the closing statement for the first verse. So then that theme, applies throughout the whole chapter. Okay, so that's the first story. The second story says Yan Perna, the second line from the bottom, page 5. Then this is about a person who has lost. He says he lost the good path, right? Has strayed from the right way, right, from the safe path, and found himself in a wilderness. Drop Gomba. Drop Gomba means a wild place, right? Uninhabited place where there are dangers. Jikpashintu Chewa. And in that wilderness, and that actually is a metaphor for samsara, Jikpashintu Chewa, Drong Shik. Drong means a town or some kind of village. Then having lost his way, then he comes upon a village, and that village is actually, there's something about it that's frightening, but this traveler decides to place his trust in that frightening town. So it's Yitemba Cheva. Yitemba means to place the trust in. I'm not sure. I take that means then your life, this life, is like a frightening, a perilous town that we need to be mindful of as we abide in this life. Then because he kind of, means that he thought everything is okay in this perilous town, then he underwent destruction. He was destroyed and died. So this is a story. I have no idea, what, this is not a well-known story. It seems so generic. I don't know what it's a reference to. Then here he says, like that, Kamsum Gidrong. No, here it says, in all the towns in the 3 realms, all the births, all the states of being in samsaric existence, Chidagi Cheba Nyawa, then where the punishment of the Lord of Death is close at hand, near at hand. Panmebenena means if you remain heedless. Panmebenena, Chidagi never jom. You will be destroyed by the Lord of Death. Then the destruction part is you'll undergo spiritual ruin. Right? You will die without having accomplished anything spiritual. Therefore, dambe che drubala zema chao. Right. So then the final statement is, therefore you should make effort to accomplish or to succeed in your whole practice of the holy dharma. So that's the end of those two stories. The stories all come at the end. I'll say this: I'm not sure that I really want to spend a lot of time going over those stories because they're some of them are kind of not easy to make sense of. Even. I could say that, and they're not really that important. Really, the meaning of the verses, which is what we're kind of focusing on here, is I think we can maybe spend mostly focusing on that. Maybe I'll skip some of the stories, but we'll have to see how it goes. Okay, so that was the first one. Now you should go Liu Shung Sheva. Liu Shung means explaining the text of this chapter. These 25 verses of the first chapter, and he says there's 3 sections. Right? So that he says is, by the way, this whole outline is not in the text of the commentary, but the translator put it in the back in an appendix. Gesavja's entire outline, and it goes verse by verse, identifies them, so you can refer to it there. So it says, means by way of practicing recollection of death, then Tarlan la Tsamba. Tarlan means the path to liberation, and that liberation can be thought of as either Hinana Nirvana or Tarba Chambo means the great liberation of enlightenment. Then the path to liberation. Tsumbe Bagyo means the mindfulness which makes effort in relation to the path to liberation. Kulwa means this first verse is meant to then urge you, right, to spur you to develop that mindfulness. Dor tema means it's a short presentation of the general theme of the entire chapter. Okay, then we have Mitakwa Gomsu Geber Sheba. Then the next 23 verses are a detailed or more extensive explanation of how to meditate on impermanence. And then the last verse is Mitapa Gomipenya, is then the benefit of having practiced it. And that's the last verse is the one that Tsongkhapa quoted in the passage that we read before the break. Okay, so Dangbani, now you have to follow the outline. Mitapa Gomsu Geber Sheba, right? Oh no, we read that. I'm sorry. Okay, so now Niva, we're on top of page 6. So this is the long, you see, now I put in brackets the description of this part of the outline so that you can follow it. Otherwise, you get lost in the outline. So Niva is Mitako Kotu Geva Sheva Lasum. There's 3 parts. Rani Choajis Jamba Gomitsu means how you yourself, as a practitioner, should meditate on the practice of recalling death. Choajis Jamba. Gomitsu. Then, so that's a treatment of the subject. This is kind of the main one. Rani chiwe jigbale mandrol shindu de nimik misembar shen chiwa bashig la nyange meripa. Oh yeah, this is an interesting section. It says mandrol shindu. You see that shindu? That doesn't mean like. It means while or as long as. As long as you have not yourself liberated yourself from the fear of death or the danger of death, so you yourself are still subject to the peril of dying without having accomplished anything spiritually, then failing to consider the disadvantages of allowing that to continue, this is a very interesting. This is saying to feel sorrow at the death of others, not think about the fact that you are subject to death, and just, kind of mourning the death of your close family members and so on. Now, that's a very interesting point. I'm trying to recall where I think you might find this sort of jarring, but the person, I don't want to put this in, it's a delicate point, but the point is saying that when someone close to you dies, whomever it might be, your own child, a parent, sibling, that the person who really practices Dharma, especially the person who understands impermanence, you should have equanimity about it. You should. It's not callous to remain even-minded at the death of a dear one. Now that is very counter to ordinary social mores, right? That's a theme that Ardeva takes up. Okay, and it's interesting. It might be challenging. Some of you might find that even kind of unappealing.
There's a question in the back.
There is question?
Yeah, I'll wait.
No, go ahead. What?
Is it not asking us to feel sorrow that another person's passing has not accomplished that they did not accomplish the fulfillment of Dharma?
No. Well, we should probably wait till we get to the verses, because the verses will speak for themselves. No, it's not that. It's the personal way in which, people go into state of depression when a family member dies, especially a spouse, say, or something like that, right? Or a child, right? People say, if a child dies, you never recover from it, or something like that. Well, from the point of view of the Dharma, it's not that you shouldn't care. It's not that you should be callous. It's a combination of things. One of the things about it is that grief that you feel, to some degree, comes from your own attachment. And that attachment is inappropriate and not helpful to the person who died, or yourself, for that matter. So one thing that I say is very clear is that this Dharma view and the societal, standards, very different. So we can take it up when we get to it. All right. So this first series is this is the middle section after about, 10 or 12 verses. Okay, so that's the second section of this second part of the second division of this middle section. And then the last one is then it says Damba means to instruct you, or to advise you to strive to accomplish to develop the path to liberation, having overcome your attachment to inferior action. So overcome, don't be distracted by worldly pursuits, and inferior or improper activities, and rather devote yourself to Dharma. So apropos of that, in Tsongkhapa's text, he says 3 root categories. Each category has 3 topics, 3 points to meditate on. And then each of the 3 has a determination. Literally, it's a decision that you're supposed to make, a resolve that you're supposed to reach when you finish meditating on the person. So, Nyabara-Chua, for instance, Nyabara-Chua says a resolve, I must practice Dharma, right? Because death is inevitable, right? That's the first one. Then the second one, namchilai ngevame, means then the time of death is uncertain, could come anytime. Then that is dandarang churche. I must start practicing right now, means don't postpone. Okay, that's the second one. Then the third one is then nothing but Dharma helps you at the time of death. So that is sure bajik. So I should try to practice Dharma exclusively as much as possible. So that means don't mix your Dharma with worldly activity. So that last one kind of comes under that category a little bit. Okay. Dangbo. Then the first of this one is a series of verses that are what you yourself should cultivate, meditate on as a way of practicing recollection of death. And then this also has two sections. Right? Rakpe mitapa gomba, chare mitapa. Now, rakpe mitapa gomba is what's in the Lamin Chemo. It's rough impermanence. That's the impermanence in terms of our mortality, death. Then the chare mitapa is then to meditate on the fact that their subtle impermanence is that we do not last for our existence is changing from moment to moment to moment, and therefore it's part of the truth of suffering, as we should understand. I would really like to address that in a kind of rigorous way, but there's a passage in Chankirti's text which I guess it doesn't give. So we'll read that, and that's sort of Chankirti's rather brief kind of overview of how to think about subtle impermanence. There's another section from Asanga Shravaka Bhumi, which I've read in How a long time ago, several years ago. I'd like to go through that in a little bit in a complete way. It's very beautiful, and I think most of us, including myself, as Western Dharma students, even as Tibetan Dharma students, rarely have an opportunity to be presented with how to practice, how to meditate on subtle impermanence. And so Asanga's presentation from the Shravaka Bhumi is really, really, I believe, very effective, very accessible, and very powerful. And at the end of it, you really get a sense of how you're supposed to experience that understanding. Well, everyone can understand that. Oh yeah, I like the Chenyu Momtoma. I can't see it, but it's happening. You can conceptually, what it's saying is comprehensible, perfectly comprehensible. But in terms of having an impact on you, not much. Just to put that statement out. Okay, so that's sort of coming attractions. So now there's about 6 or 7 verses here. I don't know how much we have time to read, but we'll read some of them that are about rough impermanence. Okay, so then here are the outline. You know what? I'm just going to read the first outline because that's the first point, because you just take time to read all 5 sections. So samba means being alive. Samba means, so it's contrasting dying, right? The fact that we are subject to death versus the fact that we are alive, and whether being alive in and of itself is any form of protection against our mortality, right? So it says samba chiwa dokje minshin, right? Being alive in and of itself does nothing to reverse death. There's nothing active. There's no force behind our still breathing from this moment to the next that guarantees that we won't die. Okay? So minshin detzamla yidemichao. Detzam means just that fact that we are currently alive should give us no sense of security, no sense of safety or protection from the peril of death. So that's the topic. Okay. And that, now if you skip down, it says there are two parts to that. One is it means that very point directly, and then the second one, which is the next verse, it says Samba yun ring war samne. So we think one of the things that we think is well, you know, most people live to be, we were talking in the car today about people living to be 90, even 100. I'm nowhere near that right now, so what do I got to worry about? I still got a long time to go. I'm still alive. So he says, somebody think somehow that the remaining time that you have, well, you will remain alive, that in any way, relying on that, you know, in our minds, it shouldn't do anything to allay our concern about the prospect of dying without accomplishing anything spiritual. Okay? 2 verses. Okay, so let's do the first one. Chiwar chachir kegyurjing. Xianwang zhuowei nangjian la. Chiwa chatar nang chita chiwa chawa tar nang te. Samba chawa mintaro. Okay. So you see here in this verse, it uses the words chiwa means death, and samba means to be alive. So there's the word jiva, maybe from Sanskrit, right? I think jiva mukti, right? Jiva means to be alive. So jiva can mean the quality of being alive. It can mean a life force. It can even mean a life spirit. But in this case, it's in the Buddhist sense, it's talking about simply being not dead, it's being alive in that sense. Okay, so it says, starts out, Jiwar chachir gyegyur jing. So he's giving this initial phrase in the first foot of the verse. It says, one has been born in order to die. Okay, so the purpose of being born samsarically is so that we can die, right? So if you think of the 12 limbs of independent origination, the 11th limb is birth, and the 12th limb is old age and death. It's like and then there is the idea, which is coming, which is really the point of this verse, which is from the very moment that we're born, we're racing towards death. Every moment is just taking us closer to that ultimate fate. So in that sense, it's like the idea of the end that I mentioned earlier, that the end of birth is to die. Then he said, then the rest of it says, Xianwang zhuowei nangjian. Xianwang means, literally means under another's power. So it means out of our own control, under someone else's control. Draw means we are moving or proceeding. So that means a sense of time, passing through time, being controlled by something other than ourselves. We do not have dominion over our existence. And that's a big part of the truth of suffering, is the helplessness. So, you know, when we think of ourselves as, and to part of the sense of self is the idea that somehow we're in control, that we are the lords of our being. We make choices. We, are masters of our destiny. From the point of view of Dharma, as long as we're subject to mental afflictions, as long as we have erring mind, we are creating karma, which will do nothing more than perpetuate our suffering existence, and we don't even know we're doing it, and so we're helpless, and so we're just like moving along like in a river, and not under our own control. Nangjian means someone who has that nature, so it's saying like that. One who's born in order to die and who has no control over that passage, of life, then the conclusion is, in that case, jiwa, death, is the thing which seems to be able to exert some kind of action. Chawa means action. It is evident, or it should be evident, that death is the one that is exerting some kind of power over us. Samba Jawa Mintaro. Samba means the fact that we are alive is not really protecting us, is not really a force which is, keeping death at bay. We're just remaining alive, but we are subject to the whims of the Lord of Death. Okay, so that's kind of the sense of the verse. How does she translate? So, just to give read a verse kind of smoothly, if you have it. Okay, verse 2. Those who are born only to die and whose nature is to be driven, right? That means they're under the control of something other than themselves, appear to be in the act of dying. It says in the act of dying. I think it is more that chawa there is some kind of force being exerted. It's not that we're in the act of dying. It's that death is an actor. Death is able to perform an action that namely end our life. And being alive does not have the power to fend death off, right? So therefore, the fact that we're breathing today should not make us feel that everything is fine. We got nothing to worry about. That's in keeping with the whole theme. And I think not all of these, but good many of these verses, there's a dynamic in the verse that's being presented. One is the in Tibetan we say pangja. Pangja means the thing that we should try to eliminate, get rid of. It means the erring psychological attitude that we are subject to, that we shouldn't accept or buy into. And then the contrast to that is the dharma, proper dharma attitude, which can get rid of it, which can eliminate it. So here, the point that we have to sort of acknowledge is that somehow we think, oh, I feel healthy. I feel, like I'm not going to die anytime real soon. I'm alive and I'm vigorous. So that idea that somehow means you're not going to die anytime soon, that's a form of self-deception. So therefore, this verse is saying it's not the fact that you're alive that is some kind of force that is somehow sustaining you. What's really going on is that the Lord of Death just hasn't dropped the hammer yet, but he could at any time. And that's the action that is real that we need to be wary of. So that's kind of the Dharma thing, is don't think that being alive is some kind of state, rely on it as some form of being secure. Okay, so enough. Let's read then. Here he says, Gashi kyewe genjen sam yimbe chiru. Okay, so here, this is the first line. Gashi means old age and death, right? That's limb 12 in the 12 limbs of dependent origination, right? Gyewe Genshin means it is conditioned by birth, right? So how does old age and death come? It's described as that which is conditioned by birth, right? So therefore, if birth occurs, inevitable old age and death will follow. Genjin Sam. So birth, it's kind of its very being, its very existence is something which is inherently subject to destruction, right? And that actually hints at subtle impermanence. The notion of subtle impermanence is right? every causally produced thing, right? Every causally produced thing. Then when you say it's causally produced, you're saying that it comes into being in dependence on some other causes and conditions. Okay, so then the entity of thing itself, whatever it might be, arises, right? So the nature of all causally produced things is at some point in time they didn't exist, and then causes and conditions came together, and so every causally produced thing will then arise. The nature of every such causally produced thing that arises is that inherently it will perish. It doesn't need anything other than itself to perish. It is perishable by its very nature. And because it doesn't need anything other than itself to perish, it does so in the next moment after it arises. So that's kind of the doctrine of subtle impermanence. And here it's being used in a sort of a broader sense, that birth, by its very nature, old age and death, by their very nature, are conditioned by birth. So it means everything that is born, by its very nature, will eventually die. Okay? Therefore, death is the thing that is always looming, right? Then here it says, jiba tamche. Jiba is bala. Bala is the B long A. Bala means child. It can mean like literally a child. Figuratively, it means spiritually immature person. More technically, it means non-Arya. By saying non-Arya, it means the person who is still subject to belief in a real self. Because in order to become an Arya, you have to perceive selflessness directly. So anyone who has not perceived selflessness directly, from the point of view of Dharma, is a child, is still subject to the error of believing that he or she is a real person, and therefore is going to be doing things that are harmful to himself or herself. So jiva tancha means all such immature beings. So it says that the 12 levels of dependent origination apply to samsaric beings. They don't apply to Aryas per se, right? Aryas are breaking out of that link, the links of dependent origination. But those who are still spiritually immature, those persons, whenever they're born, then their purpose for being born is ultimately just to die, right? They are initially born so that they may ultimately die, right? That's a pretty pessimistic statement, right? Then it says, so I've underlined everything that is that are words in the verse. Sheme seja serpartiwa tar. Then this is an image that is, there are verses in the Udana Varga, and they're quoted in the Lamachamo, that this immature person is like a domesticated animal that's being led to the slaughter. We don't realize that the sheep or the cow that know that the only reason they were being husbanded is so that someday they will be slaughtered and eaten. But so we are not terribly unlike that. That we are oblivious to our mortality. We go through our lives oblivious to our mortality. So sheme means, in this case, sheme means the butcher, right? Seja means then those animals that are going to be killed. Serbartiwa means they're being led to the slaughterhouse. And we're like that. We're on our way to the slaughterhouse. Then along the way, Baryang. Baryang means as we are going, as we're being led to the slaughterhouse, Gawa dang nawa dang guva so kien shingi wangi. Shen wang says we are not in control of our destiny. So it's saying we are under the control of something else. Then here he says the something else is old age, sickness, and misfortune, and the other travails of samsaric existence. So we are under their power. They mete out their weight without our being able to do anything to stop it. Gengi wangi, geji kyang miderbar, right? So geji kyang miderbar means without respite. Miderbar means without stopping, even for a second, right? There's no timeouts. Then geji kyang miderbar chidati jung du droa. So here it says, those whose nature is that of going under the power of someone else or under someone else's control. Going means going to, it says, to the presence of the Lord of Death. It means going to our end, to our final end. Nangsul Jengi Sumba means that so a person who is alive, that's life. Life is, we're constantly being battered by the difficulties of samsara, which bring old age, sickness, and other difficulties, travails. And as we go along, then eventually, where we end up is that our demise. So it's not a pretty picture thing, right? So given that, the person who is alive in that manner, the samba means then that's the word that comes in the second half of the verse, thing. To think that somehow being alive is some kind of protection for you is total folly, it's saying, right? Samba lani, to be the fact that we are alive, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to place our trust in that and to think that somehow being alive is some kind of insurance policy against death. Death is always in the course of exerting his action, right? And then here's I tried to edit the text, but I don't catch everything. It looks like mikbo. There shouldn't be any gigu over the ma, and it should be naro over go. Ga, so it should be go. Secha go jobataro. Like, so the action of Lord of Death is like that of a condemned person who is about to have their head lopped off. So that is the real force that's going on in the world, not any force that's keeping us alive. It's not like, if we think about it, we can't recognize that being alive is, some kind of preventative that is keeping death at bay. It's not doing anything to ward off death. And then, forget it, is it clear, that message? So the message is, we're what?
Don't be content with being alive.
Don't be content with being alive, because moment by moment, we are racing towards death. So here, in fact, is another verse from the Jatakamala. This is the 32nd chapter. And this is quoted by Chandakirti in his text. It's also quoted by Tsongkhapa Nyalmaren Chemo. Get up, lay. Okay? Miwang. Miwang means Lord of Men. This is the vocative. And this is the Bodhisattva prince talking to his father. The story is the story of called Iron House. So this is a king who had many of his children die soon after they were born. So he built an iron house that was supposed to protect them. And then the Bodhisattva was born, and he's living in this iron house during his childhood. And then at the end, he says he wants to go and become an ascetic and renounce worldly life. And so he addresses his father, and he says, Miwang. Miwang is the Lord of Men. So he's saying, or, what's the word? Or monarch, right? Miwang Pao, it's actually Naravira. I think it was Naravira. Vira means a hero, right? So, oh hero who is Lord of Men, right? Tongme Tsemor Ni. Tongme Tsemor means at the very beginning, on that very first night, when you are conceived in the womb of your mother, right? It says, Tongme Tsemor Ni. Gangne, from which point the world, Jikten means the world. It means not just me, it means everybody, right? The world. Ngelna Nejurba. Ngelna means then Ngel means the womb. Then Nejurba means like to enter and sort of take up residence. And it was like entering like a little house, right, inside the womb. From that moment on, Dene Tsamte means that henceforth, even in the womb, it's saying, even in the womb, before you've actually, quote, been born, you're actually starting the course that will end with your death. Dene, Nine Xing, day by day. Then this is a really beautiful image. Here it says, Drushol Mebar. Drushol Mebar. Dra means like a step. Here what it says, movement, right? Then Shol Mebar is almost means without any delay, like putting off. But actually the Sanskrit is really, it's beautiful. It says, there's a word, prayana. Prayana, it means going forth. So literally it means moving forward. But it has meanings. It has meanings of like to depart. And it also has meaning to go to your death. So it means and then askalita means without any stumbling. So it's sort of like in a steady and unwavering manner, you're moving day by day. Then it says, Chidak Jungdu Draw. We are moving in that unfaltering and irreversible motion towards the presence, towards the Samipa means in the next to come in the presence of the Lord of Death. So this is the verse of Tela Numba Matching in the Laman Choman says Tela Numba Matching means there is nothing that we can do to extend our lifespan. We can't make it longer, and moment by moment, it's getting shorter and shorter. We're going towards our death. So think of our life as sort of racing. Sometimes there are images of like being on a horse, running towards death. That's under the category of the certainty of death, the inevitability of death. So, Shevatarabo. Then that is the commentary for the second verse, which is meant to be, how is the heading described? Is Karasa. Right? Being alive does nothing to put a stop to death. Just the fact that we're alive should not give us any sense of security. Okay, then there is again, I won't read it. It said that this is a story. It says the king a cruel king gave one of his messengers the task of completing his delivery of something within a period of days, and he must return at the risk of death if he didn't do it within a certain number of days. So the idea is that we are pressed, we're being pressed within a limited period of time, and we're going to go home in the sense of end, our lives are going to end quickly. So there's a sense of being under that pressure. So these are the kinds of stories that are, kind of just sort of almost like little amusing anecdotes that sort of convey the same idea as the verse. I don't think they're really necessary to put a lot of time on them, so I'll let them go. Just by the other one, to show you that they're difficult. It says shak jang. Shak jang means shak means day. Jang means a certain number of days. So the king told this messenger he had to return within a certain number of days, and so not to. I'm uncomfortable doing this, but at any rate, this is the way. It says.
What page are you
Sent
on?
out on a cold night, right? This is page 115. This is the illusions for illusion. So jang, karata janga jang means cold. Karata janga sa jang means the number of count. So a specific number of days. Translated that it was cruel because the sent message out when night was cold. So if you read that, it's kind of misleading. But so these stories are challenging to translate. All right, go to the next one. The next story is even more bizarre. I'll let you look it up. It's about some. You can read it. Honestly, I don't know what to make sense of the second story for this verse, so I'm not going to even try. Okay, next verse. Niva. This is line 4, page 7. Sombayun was samne minjikpa. Gakpa means then to prevent you from being unafraid of death because you think that you have a long time yet to live. So that's this is very interesting. This is there's a lot of psychological what should I say, nuance. There's a lot of real insight into human nature if you read these verses carefully. Okay, so it says, and they're also poetic. So it says, "Kirki." Kirki means you, for you, or by you. Dedu means the past. Okay, I mean the amount of your life that's already gone by. And tumu means you think that's short, right? The amount of time that you've actually lived is not very long. And then it should be tungmu instead of tungdu. That's some typo. Tungmur tongshin. You look at the past as if it were a short length of time. Mawong shenduna. And you think of what lies the future, what lies ahead, as very long and within this lifetime. Oh yeah, I got a lot of years left. Nothing to worry about. The past, it flew by, but compared to the future, there's a lot of time waiting. Chenduna. Then he says, nyam minyam tarsente. Now this is a means this is a case where nyam means the same. Minyam means not the same. So different, right? So it says you are considering what actually is the same as being different, right? So you're thinking of the past as short, you're thinking of the future as long. They're not the same. They're different in that sense. Sawar jigbe ododra. He says clearly, sawar jigbe ododra. This is the case where you are and this is a cry of fear. A cry of fear in this context means it's a statement that you're making to reassure yourself in the face of your own fear. It's like whistling in the dark, right? Or you actually are really afraid, but to reassure yourself, you say, "I'm not afraid." Like that. So it's a false claim. It's a false claim to see the future as long and the past as short. It's because you don't want to face your impending death. Okay, so here it's a "Chemirite" means this is very wrong. This is very inappropriate. You know, he says, "Cheki devedu tumuta tongxing." You think of the past as a short period of time. I don't know if he says it here, but I think in Chandrakirti's text, he says, let's say you're a young person and you live 16 years. Okay, so that's if you think, well, a human being can live to be 100. So those 16 years, that's not very long. The 84 years that are left, right? That's a long time. Nothing to worry about, right? He says that's like the fact you know that you could die at any time, but you tell yourself you still have a very long period of time just to reassure yourself, because you don't want to think about the fact that you could step in front of a bus anytime, right? So he says, if you consider the future to be something other than that, other than short means long, and having done so, and therefore feel it's okay not to worry, to be careless, to kind of do what you please. Means to conduct yourself in a heedless manner, right? Shinto mirikte, so that's a very wrong thing to do. You shouldn't be that way, right? Rinjen Kawale, this Ratnavali is Narjuna's text. How are we doing? Okay. Ratnavali, the Chue Keni Mate, Sambayini, Jungse Chik, Deda Namkan Chiwayang, Dewetatu, Chunze Chik. So this is verse 76 in chapter 3 of Ratnavali. It says, Chue means the causes of death are many, literally, right? There are many things that can bring your death. Outer things, natural disaster, inner things, your own illnesses, other human beings that can betray you. Many different things can bring your untimely death, right? Mahate. Sambayini, the things that can promote life. Samba means to keep you alive are few, are only few. Like, well, shelter, protects you from the elements. Good food is meant to prolong your life, things like that. But there aren't many such things that you can rely on to keep yourself alive. And he says, Deda nam gyang chiwayang. Deda nam means even those things that ostensibly are meant to prolong your life, it can also bring your death. Your house can collapse. You can eat something that doesn't agree with you. And so even those things that are supposed to prolong your life can actually end it. Therefore, at all times, practice the Dharma. It's again this urgency, right? So this is interpreted as the category of the uncertainty of the time of death. It has to come anytime. Then he says, Ringtung nyamba muente deba tungshing maomba ringwe minyamba tar semba deni sewar chiwe jigba. This is interesting because Getaje takes the word, you think of the two, past and future, either as the same or different. Meaning you might think that, well, let's say if you're 50 years old, well, okay, I've lived 50 years, I got another 50 to live, so they're the same. Or if you're young, you might think, I've lived a short time, I still have a long time to live. He takes it as a what's it called? The or is there's a kind of a philosophical word for something which is an either or. That doesn't come to mind right now. Chandrakirti takes it, you consider the thing which is the same as being different, which is not reading it differently. What that means is, Chandrakirti says, whether the past is short or long depends on, how much longer you actually live. If you lived 16 years and you die tomorrow, then the past was long and the future will determine whether the past is short or long, because it depends on something that hasn't happened yet. And the same thing is true of the future. We don't know how long we have yet to live. It may be short or it may be long. There's no way to determine it. So in that sense, both are uncertain. They are the same, right? So we think of them as different. We think one is short and the other is long, when in fact both of them are indeterminable as to whether they are short or long. That's the way Chandrakirti takes it. Gets up, Jay, reads it a little bit differently. I like that second one a little bit better. The things which are actually uncertain, you are saying that they have some kind of determinable time frame to them. That's a mistake. That is wishful thinking. That is whistling in the dark. That is whistling past the graveyard. That kind of thing. He says, you do that out of fear, he says. Really, that's a clear indication that actually you don't want to think about your death, so you deceive yourself into thinking you're not going to die anytime soon. So it's like, then he says here, singing, like I think Chandrakirti's text is like you sing a song when you're afraid to sort of buck yourself up. Then that kind of thinking is that sort of false sense of security that you deceive yourself into having because you don't want to face the uncertainty of death. He says, Lam jigba dan jeba shukpe mishik, right? So lam jigba dan jeba means a perilous path. Shukpe mishik means someone who is on a perilous path, who's traveling on a perilous path. Jom Kumba means a bandit, some highwayman who might rob you along New York. It's what is it? Buggers, right? So Jom Kumbe Jikshindu means where you're there is the peril of being attacked, and you know that, but because you're afraid and you don't want to, you don't like that, the discomfort of that fear. So you minjik the kitchen. You say, I'm not afraid, when in fact you are. So this kind of thinking that you have a lot of time when in fact you know you don't, if you really think about it, is just out of fear of the uncertainty of death, that you want to tell yourself you're going to live longer than you know. It's like singing a song. So when the Titanic was sinking, they all sang hymns like that.
They're rearranging the deck furniture.
Huh?
I thought they were rearranging.
Oh, no, it's famous. Just the actual hymn that they sang. No. Yeah. I didn't mean to make light of that, but it seems appropriate. Oh, yeah. This one is really strange. This story here is really strange. You read it. I urge you to read it in either of them, especially read it in Chandrakirti's words, because some of them they're really kind of they're almost strange. I don't think that they are essential for the Dharma meaning. I will tell you this. It says 1, 2, 3 lines from the bottom. You see it says Bao Sha Da She. Looks like that means explain. Do you see that? At the front of the line.
Third line up, did you say?
Yes. Manungi Bardu Sheba.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? That Sheba should be Shangwa,
Shun.
not Sheba. Shangwa. Shangwa means feces.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And that comes 3 times. It's written as Sheba, but it's actually Shangwa. Okay, so the story is about shit in a room. So you can read it and see if you can make sense of it.
Is it Bao Shang Na?
Yeah, Bao Shang Na Shang and Wa Shangwa. Yeah. It
Kind of makes sense.
what?
Just that I mean, you didn't really explain it, but just the idea that
Okay, I'll tell you this is what the story about. The story is about travelers, okay, a group of travelers. They go to they rent a room, and then for some reason or another, they shit all over the room. Then most of the travelers leave. Okay, there's a couple of them that are left. Okay, then the innkeeper comes, sees shit all over the room, and he gives them the business. He says he's gonna, do something to them if they don't clean it up. So among the remaining ones, each one of those persons who remain is only willing to clean up his or own shit. He won't clean up anybody else's shit. So how that's apropos to this verse, I'll leave you to figure it out. It's clever. It's quite clever. Is that what you got? So you can read it and explain it to me next time. Okay. Then the next. Okay. So that's that one. Now the next one is we're now book 4, right? Okay, we're moving along. Now we're in the second section. The section of these 5 divisions. Now the second one is. So this one said you shouldn't think that you're going to live for a long time, and that should, put an end to your fear of death. And that's inappropriate to think of. Now the second category says, and this says, everyone is going to die. Means death is something that is common to everyone. Therefore, it's not appropriate to be afraid of death. Okay. Now, what that's saying is, so what's the common worldly idea there? The common worldly idea there is death comes to us all. So what's the point of getting concerned? It's almost like a fatalistic sort of thing. Why should I get all worked up about it? He dies, she dies, everybody dies. I'm one of everybody. I'm going to die. Can't do anything about it. That's it. Shouldn't even think about it. Because that's a very common sort of everyday secular way of thinking. Okay, here he's saying that's a bad way that we shouldn't think that way. That's only a way to kind of, again, it's a way in which we avoid looking at our mortality from a spiritual perspective, which is to say life is precious. We should take advantage of what remains of our life because we don't know how long it will be and feel urgency to act. This is sort of a numbing way of thinking about death, which lulls us into inactivity. Okay? So to the extent that that's real, to the extent that we allow ourselves to, entertain those kinds of, self-deluding thoughts, we are, as Tongao said, we are killing the life force of the path, which means the ability for us to be able to pursue the Dharma effectively. So it's no small thing. Okay, so it says, okay, so now he's going, so actually there is a progression to these verses too. Okay, so he starts off saying, well, I can't say for certain that the future is long. So I can't sort of delude myself into thinking I'm not going to die anytime soon and sort of mollify my concern, right? But nevertheless, everybody dies. So I shouldn't think of myself as unique, that I'm going to die. It's a terrible thing. I'm going to die. Everybody dies. No big deal. No biggie, right? So he's saying, therefore, talk about chamigoso means, therefore, don't need to be afraid. Death comes to everyone, right? He says, that is very wrong, very inappropriate. Now, verse 4, okay? You're not going to read it, huh?
Oh,
Yeah, you claim you have such a beautiful voice. So he says, since death is common to others too, all right? It's also common to others, right? You have no fear of it. Therefore, if you say that's reason not to be afraid of death, not to be concerned about death, then the question is, this is only when some kind of harm befalls a single individual, right? And then out of jealousy, do you feel suffering? Now that's an odd statement, right? Does jealousy cause suffering when only one is harmed? So it's saying, does it have to be something that's unique to you and therefore kind of out of a sense of, now what does he mean by saying jealousy? That you should be concerned about the fact that you're going to die soon. So does that have to be the case? That it's only you that dies? That something untoward happens uniquely to you, and that only then will you say that it's something that I should be upset about? Really is what it means. Like here is it uses the word for, the word in Tibetan is chatok. I think I mentioned this last week, that chatok is a form of anger, right? And it's one of the secondary mental afflictions. It's a sense of pique that you feel at another person's well-being that you lack. Okay, so here he's using that word in the sense that when you alone, he turns it around. It says, when you alone experience some misfortune and nobody else has to endure it, is then what will you become indignant, right? Or feel that somehow you've been unfairly wronged. It's unfair. So it's like this, like I'm an only child, so I'm not familiar with this, but I understand that, like if you're in a family and there's a lot of siblings and one of them gets singled out by the parent and gets scolded or punished, then that child says, that's not fair, the other one did it too, right? That kind of feeling. That's what it's talking about here. That somehow it's not, the only time that you will be upset about your death is if it's something that is unique to you. In the same way you say, well, not these other people, they're not dying, but I have to die. So only then will I be worried about it. But the fact that they're going to die too, then, we're all in the same boat. Like it's like, okay, so you get punished and then you say, well, he did too. And then that one gets whacked. And then you say, okay, well, good. It makes you feel better that the next guy your brother or sister got whacked too. So it kind of lessens your feeling of being punished, right? So kind of that kind of mentality, very childish. Okay, so it's saying like that. So now here he says, Chua semjin shen la yang chi dun yinbe chur, chur la chua jigba mena means if you say that the reason you don't have any fear of death is because it's something that comes to everyone, right? Semjin shen la yang means other person. Kansa chigla chidaki nerba kan yimba de, chana mi towana dungelshing. So here he says it like that. Kuela tongna dungegilo minjoani. So then by this logic, then it says, "Gansa jigla," to one person alone, right? Chidagi nerba, gan yimba means the harm or ending your life, that harm, the harm of death, if it is not seen in others, if it's only seen in one person, then that person should feel suffering, should feel upset, right? Guila tongna, if that person should see that everyone feels the suffering of death, then he or she doesn't feel any suffering in relation to that fact, right? He says, Chikbude means the first one, right? That other one. Then that person is feeling some kind of envy or jealousy. It's saying, in the sense that you feel unfairly singled out as the only one. Yeah? That sense of envy, which is not the way we normally think of envy, but that's how it's been here, right? But he says, death, is that the way the suffering, is that the way death brings suffering? Is it just a mental thing that we would feel because we were singled out unfairly and other people were not, and that's the only reason that we would fear death? He's asking a rhetorical question, right? Then he says, no, that's not the case. He says, then death itself is a dungel keva yimbe. Death itself creates suffering. Now, I think what he really means is that death creates suffering in the sense that if you die without having cultivated dharma, then you will have to suffer future samsaric suffering in the extreme form in the lower realm. So in that sense, death itself, if you have lived a heedless life, is not just a prospect that will make you mentally unhappy. It will bring for you very real pain and suffering. And it has nothing to do with numbers. It has nothing to do with you being the only one or everyone having it. Everyone is subject to the same kind of actual suffering, not suffering at the thought of dying. So therefore, you should not think of the fact that death is universal. Tumoani means that it's common to everyone, as a cause for removing any sense of whatever fear, suffering, whatever suffering death might represent. The suffering that death represents is irrespective of the fact that only you are subject to it or everyone is subject to it. The suffering that death brings is something that you will have to endure following your death, the consequences of your death. And that has nothing to do with whether it's universal. It's not a fact that has nothing to do with how you think about it. It is in fact something that will bring directly. It's not a mental response. It's something that all beings, each and every one of them, will experience for themselves very directly, and it's not a mental apprehension. I said, now here there's a story. Gyalbo drongba chigla tongman cha langbe dungela chi tamjela langba dungemi java tangbu de trago ki dungewa yinla. So here's a story of a king who exacted a tax from one of the citizens of his domain. And when the first person had a tax imposed on them, that person felt unfairly singled out and was unhappy. But then when all the other subjects of the kingdom also paid a tax, then he felt some kind of relief. And that is thinking like that as a way of sort of allaying your concern about the prospect of dying without practicing the Dharma. That is kind of foolish. Right? So then he says, right? This is following the sources. The suffering of death has nothing to do with that kind of, sense of being treated unfairly, right? It's not that death treats everyone equally. Therefore, don't worry about it. Then he says, this kind of brings home the point by Getamje. It's not in, I don't think it's in Transkirtan. Nyawar nebe chok mangwe dungel chungala mi pembashino. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, when you are dwelling in the hells, the fact that there are many companions who are experiencing the same suffering does nothing to lessen yours. So the point is clear, okay? So it's like a misplaced idea about what the fear of death represents. Okay. Maybe we can do one more. What time is it? Okay, one more. Sumba. Okay, so now this is similar to the idea of that you're not going to die anytime soon. They're saying, oh, well, the things that are, sort of hasten our death are sickness or old age. And say, well, those are kind of hardships that are remediable, right? That we can mitigate, we can lessen them. If we have an illness, we can treat it medically. Old age, we take care of ourselves. Then we can lessen its impact. Then it says, for that reason, thinking along those lines, that somehow you're putting off death. Right? That is a false thought. Okay? To avoid being concerned about death, for that reason, is inappropriate. So here it says, if you're healthy, right? If you're totally healthy, nawameba means free of illness. Free of illness means healthy, right? Gawamebe means if you're young, right? And youthful, right? Therefore, you're not going to die. Youthfulness and health are no guarantee that death can be averted. Moreover, so those are just saying, if you're youthful, and usually when we're young and youthful, we do stupid things, right? We think we're, invincible, right? That's that kind of thinking, right? So that's not true. Even if we're like some of us in this room, a little bit older and not so healthy, we shouldn't think that soche means medical treatment can alleviate sickness. And julen is literally a kind of elixir. There are different things that in Indian culture you can take that are meant to be life prolonging. Right? Gawameva, this is put off aging. Julen is the rasayana in Sanskrit term. Right? Then just means you can mitigate sickness and old age, right? If you think that, therefore, you don't have to be concerned about your death. It says, yeah, that's true that sickness and old age can be remedied to some degree, right? 中世就是越北 but 救了民族把没有跳 right? Then that's kind of turning the statement back to you. However, that doesn't mean that it's proper not to fear death. Just leading into the verse. It's a good translation, so it's worth reading. Okay. How many people have the English that are following? Not too many.
Is that the one you recommend?
Yeah. This one is, I think, better translation.
Could you just repeat the title?
Arya Deva's 400 stanzas on the middle way. And somebody said that there's actually a PDF online that can be downloaded if you want.
And who's it by, please?
The translator is Ruth Sunam. It's sorry?
You used this a lot last week too, so this is your primary text?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here it says, sickness can be cured and aging treated. Therefore, you do not fear them. It's acknowledging that. You don't have to be as concerned about those hardships, those forms of suffering, right? Mijik me means I acknowledge that. I will allow that, right? I will agree with that. Therefore, you do not fear them. Yet, there is no cure for the last, and she says ordeal. It's like punishment, I think it's really, but that last hardship, right? Death itself is the final hardship, right? It cannot be remedied, right? Therefore, obviously, you should, I think you should fear it. She says here, you do fear it. There's obviously you fear it. I think it's more prescriptive. You should fear it. Okay, so using medical treatment, illness can be cured. Old age, then old age can be to some degree then lessened by good health, good diet, and such things. Therefore, therefore, for the time being, or to some degree, it's jiksu chuk means I can agree or I can allow, means going along with that notion. But then chebachima means that this is the kind of the poetic reference to death. Chebachima means the final punishment or the final hardship. Chue jigba, then the peril associated with death. It cannot be, there's no way to stop it. There's no way to remedy it. Therefore, so it says, therefore, you should be concerned about death. There's no way to cheat death or avoid death. So again, there's some stories here. The one story is pretty simple. A king was told that a gyalbo rengba, this is the first line on page 9. Rengba normally means stiffened. So, for instance, do you know that? You should know that. What is that?
Yeah.
That is means to stupefy.
Right.
So they're the same word. There are certain spirits that can possess you and make you kind of put you into a state of stupor.
That's a ticket.
Hmm?
That's
Yeah, Pange. So it's the same word, but that word has other meanings besides that. It can mean to be arrogant, stubborn. So in this case, it means the latter. It means to be sort of a minister or someone who is subject to the king, but some person of authority is acting at odds with the king. And so in that sense, rengba. You have to understand in that sense. Ponyawa shen ngakwa. It says ponyawa means then sent messengers. Actually, in Chandakirti, if you read it, so the king dispatched, he was told that, so the king dispatched an army to go and subdue that minister. And so in the story, it says he sent one army and the minister bribed the army, and so they didn't. And so then the king was told that he sent another army, and same thing happened. So those two armies are sickness and old age, right? And then the third time, the king himself went with the army and killed the minister. So that story is meant to illustrate the king's death itself. So he couldn't, the minister couldn't, put off the king. There's another story. I think we're out of time for today. Okay, so we're in the midst of this kind of what's meant to be an extensive series of verses talking about rough form of impermanence, thinking about our mortality and to develop the kind of mind that we read about in the Lamachurma, meaning to kind of overcome our sense of attachment and to feel the urgency to practice Dharma while we have the opportunity, and to be concerned that we might not be able to do that unless we apply ourselves as soon as possible. And so each of these verses is meant to overcome anything that would stand in the way of that Dharma attitude or that Dharma way. Okay, leave it there. I'm sorry. I think next time I will leave a little time at the end of the class, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions if you like.
When will be next time?
Huh?
When will be next time?
Well, we're next Saturday, 29th. If you're up for it, I'm up for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a little recitation. Rindu bele zoni katarayam bhagan shitagate lome mare ki tondrowana namjen gyawe amboda gyujik dharma sembe tsera gunduriyam Chambe yanki dewe jesune Tembe rimba kun salangi jo Nyene kube kena nye jo Rangi jishin owe langine Shura zewe janbe takegi Drove yiki mumba sejene Yewe demba yurin zingyuje Demba rinjen cho yogi magyama yagyanyamba gyube chodeni inje tempo yiragyapai pende tende sawarache barjo seje gyawe me jujin lele le ju chanchu langirim begyang Dardu nangi yila bedejing Gyawe zebarindu kyong yuji Lamsan drube dungen drujijing Gegen seche mina mimingun Seragundu gyawe narayi Nanda Lamsandra Waramayuji Ganze Deba Jola Chu 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 Sushin Drula Zamba Deyize Dundenam Gita Tudrojijin Trashi Gadzu Chokun Kyagyu Sana Yeshi Tozoshi Sana Yeshi Leinowe Tamba Kunyi Toba. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the weekend.